Hey everybody, it is Chris, and today we are going to be talking about multiclassing in D&D, specifically the one-level dip. So it's been pretty common since 5th edition, since 2014 rules, to take a one-level dip in a different class as your multiclass, because this can provide all kinds of benefits. Sometimes you want to take that dip right at level 1. Sometimes you don't want to take that dip at level 1, but you'll take it later on. And some of the same dips are good in the 2024 rules, and some of them have changed. What dip you might want to take with different classes might not be exactly the same as it was in 2014, and so I think it's worth an analysis. And so what I want to do in this video is I'm just going to go through all the classes in D&D, and I'm going to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of taking them as a one-level dip, what you get from it, whether you would want to take them at level 1 and whether you would want to take them later on, and which kinds of builds would want these classes as a one-level dip. And yeah, that's the introduction. Let's get going. We're going to talk about the Barbarian first. So the first thing we need to talk about with any dip are the requirements, because there are multi-class requirements to dip any class, and some of them are very, very restrictive, and some of them are very, very permissive. So it does make a big difference. So if we're talking about the Barbarian, what you need, 13 strength. Now that doesn't sound too bad, but if you actually start to make builds, you can find, or you will find, that it is deceptively difficult for a lot of builds. 13 strength can be like really almost impossible to fit on monks and rangers specifically. And strength is often a dump stat. For all kinds of builds, it's a dump stat. And to go from a dump stat to 13 is not an easy ask. But what do you get from it? Well, you're going to get martial weapon proficiency. You're going to get shield proficiency. You're going to get 2 rages per day. No primal knowledge with that, so no skill bonuses. But you will get 2 rages per day. 1 back on every short rest, and both back on a long rest. You will get unarmored defense, and unarmored defense for barbarians allows you to use 10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your constitution modifier, and you can use a shield with unarmored defense with a barbarian, which you can't do with monk. And then you will get weapon mastery with 2 weapons, and you can switch them after a long rest. You don't need to level up in barbarian again to switch them, and they can be basically any weapon you want. Also, Barbarian is going to be a hit point boost for any class you take it with. It is the largest hit die in the game, so no matter what class you multi-class Barbarian from, you should expect at least 1 additional hit point. That might not be a big deal, but it's there. So that's what you get for dipping Barbarian. Now, if you choose to dip Barbarian at level 1, you get a little bit more. You will get medium armor proficiency. You don't get that if you dip Barbarian later on. You will get 12 hit points plus your constitution modifier at level 1. And the reason this makes difference is because at every other level, if you go in, you're basically going to get 1 extra hit point per die type. So if you were normally a D10 in your original class, maybe you were a fighter, and then you took Barbarian for 1 level, you're going to get 1 extra hit point then if you went fighter. But if you take Barbarian at level 1, you actually get 2 additional. Okay, so you get a little bit more of a hit point boost by taking this at level 1. And we will get save proficiency in strength and constitution saving throws. And which saving throws you get is a big factor on whether you want to take something at level 1 or not. And Constitution is probably the most important saving throw in the game. It's the one that comes up. I mean, Wisdom, Dexterity, and Constitution all come up a lot. Constitution probably comes up more than either of the other two, but it's close. Then, of course, all concentration saving throws are Constitution. So Constitution's really good. Strength is normally not considered all that great. However, since 2024, it's better. And the reason it is better is because grapples now involve a saving throw, and you pick dexterity or strength, meaning that your strength saving throw will apply to resisting a grapple. So there is that additional benefit to strength saving throws. So strength and constitution, I'd say, is actually a pretty good combination. So who would want to take this dip, and when would they want to take it? Well, I think one of the most obvious picks for a barbarian dip is the fighter. And the main reason is for rage. A fighter can make great use of rage, and rage has certain restrictions, like not allowing you to cast or concentrate on spells. For a fighter, this is probably not a problem unless you are an Eldritch Knight. So there's likely no conflict, and rage can really help your defense because it's going to give you resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, and piercing damage, and fighters can use additional defenses because they are often frontline characters. But I would not take it until after level 6, because the benefits that you're going to get at level 1 really don't matter for a fighter. They're largely getting the same things anyways. And what it would do is, if you took it at level 1, it's going to push back getting extra attack into level 6. You want extra attack as soon as you can get it. So I would wait until level 6 before dipping it. But as a fighter, it can often be a really good dip. Another kind of character you might want to dip one level of Barbarian with is any character where you don't want to wear armor, right? Like you're envisioning a character that doesn't wear armor, so you want unarmored defense, and your character is not wisdom based. Because if you are wisdom based, even if you account for the shield that you could wear with Barbarian unarmored defense, you're still likely going to get as good or better an armor class with a dip in Monk. But if you are not wisdom based, then wisdom is probably a dump stat or close to a dump stat, and Constitution is really never a dump stat for any kind of optimized character. So you're probably going to be better off with a Barbarian dip than a Monk dip. Never mind the fact that Barbarian might be easier for you to dip than Monk. We'll talk about that more when we get to Monk. So if you're playing a non-wisdom based character and you don't want to wear armor because that's, the vision for your class, Barbarian might be an essential dip for you. And some other builds that might want a 1-level Barbarian dip: Valor Bard or Blade Pact Warlock. But in either case, you have to be a strength forward build. Otherwise, that 13 strength requirement is going to be difficult. But you probably want to be careful with rage with either of these choices, because you can't cast spells or concentrate on spells while you're raging. And unlike in 2014, you can't just end your rage whenever you want. It lasts until the end of your next turn as a minimum, and there's no way to turn it off anymore. You used to be able to use a bonus action, I think, to end your rage. You can't anymore. That's not there anymore. Now it just runs out, but that might be a while. And if you are wanting to cast spells, well, you are cut off from access from them if you're raging. So if you are a Valor Bard or Blade Pact Warlock, you might still want Barbarian because you like the Constitution saving throws, you like the hit points, you like the armor and shield proficiencies. But if you are going to use rage, I'm just warning you to be very careful with it. And Barbarian as a 1-level dip also can work for a caster dip just to get armor and Constitution proficiency, as I was just mentioning. But it's usually not your best option. It works, but there's probably a better way to go, unless your character happens to be a strength forward character. But a lot of characters that want armor dips are either focusing on a casting stat or they're focusing on dexterity, and in those cases I probably wouldn't go Barbarian. So Barbarian, I would say, as a dip class, is not fantastic, and it's probably worse than it was in 2014. In 2014, I would have said Paladin might want to dip Barbarian because you could still access your spell slots while raging through Divine Smite, and you can't anymore. So that multiclass isn't as good as it used to be. So I would say, for a fighter at level 6 or higher, I can totally see it. There's certain kinds of other characters who might want it, but they probably also have some other options. Let's talk about the Bard. So if you want to dip the Bard, what you're going to need is a charisma of 13. Now, considering the number of classes that have charisma as either the primary stat or secondary stat, this is actually quite easy for a lot of builds. For a lot of builds, the 13 charisma won't even need to be a consideration. So here's what you're going to get if you dip 1 level of Bard. You're going to get an extra skill proficiency. You're going to get 1 musical instrument. You're going to get light armor training, which isn't that great, but you get it. You get 1 level of spell slot progression. You're going to get Bardic Inspiration. It'll be a D6, and there's no short rest recovery, but you'll get a number of uses equal to your charisma modifier. You're going to get 2 Bard cantrips, and you're going to get 4 first-level Bard spell preparations. If you dip at level 1, you're going to get Dexterity and Charisma save proficiencies, which I don't think is great, gotta say. 8 plus Constitution starting hit point. For most classes, that's not going to be an advantage. Your starting skills can be any skill. This is one thing about the Bard, is when they select their skills at level 1, they can pick any 3 skills. No other class can do that. So if you are making a skill-focused character and you have very specific ideas on what skills you want, Bard might work really well for you. If you dip at level 1, you also are going to get 2 additional musical instrument proficiencies, if that matters to you, because you only get 1 if you multiclass Bard after level 1. But I have to say, I don't think this is a great first level dip, unless you are making a character that is a very specific skill-focused plan. For most characters, I don't think this is all that great at level 1, but it might be okay later on. The ones I think it might be good for later on are any charisma-forward character just for inspiration and continuing your spell slot progression. So if you're playing something like a Paladin or a Warlock, a 1-level dip just to get that inspiration can be reasonably good, because you are continuing your spell slot progression as if you had continued in your regular class, or maybe even more if you were continuing in Paladin, for example. I think it is a pretty good Paladin dip, actually. But again, I would wait until after level 6. For the same reason a fighter would want to wait till after level 6 to dip Barbarian, we're just not really getting anything by taking Bard at level 1, and we are putting our extra attack a level behind. And in the case of Paladin, we're putting our Aura of Protection a level behind. So I wouldn't wait until level 6, I'd wait until after level 6 to get it once we have our Aura of Protection. I also think it's pretty good for a Warlock to get a couple first level spell slots. So the Warlock, of course, will benefit from getting inspiration as well. The charisma forward, so they're going to have lots of uses, so it's nice. But also Warlocks, because of pack magic, after level 3, they don't have first level slots anymore. So if they have any spells that they can cast, let's say that they have Magic Initiate Wizard, well, they might have the shield spell. But do they want to use a pack magic slot when pack magic is 3rd level spells to cast shield? Probably not. But that 1-level dip in Bard is going to give you a couple first level spell slots, and you can use them on shield. So those are the characters I'd consider a first level dip in Bard on, but I don't think there are many builds where I would be looking at level 1 for Bard. And we move on to the Cleric. What do you need for Cleric? Wisdom 13. And what do we get? Well, we get light and medium armor and shield training. We get 1 level of spell slot progression. We get 3 Cleric cantrips. We get 4 Cleric first level prepared spells. And we get Divine Order. And Divine Order allows us to select either a Wisdom bonus to Arcana or Religion and 1 extra cantrip, or Martial Weapons and Heavy Armor. Another thing I want to mention is that a 1-level dip in Cleric gives us access to the Bless spell. And I mention that because Bless is a bit of a standout spell, and it is a spell that remains good at higher levels, even if you only cast it as a 1st level spell. Now, I would not say there are a whole lot of advantages to dipping Cleric at level 1. We're going to have 8 plus Constitution hit points. That's not likely to be a standout for many builds. And we're going to get Wisdom and Charisma saving throw proficiency. Wisdom is one of the better saving throws. Of our top 3, we have Constitution, we have Wisdom, and we have Dexterity. And I'd probably put them in that order of importance. As for Charisma, we're comparing it to Intelligence and Strength, and I would say it's relatively similar. So who is this dip good for? Well, the first thing I'd point out is that if you want to pick up heavy armor proficiency and a spell slot level progression, the only way to do it after level 1 is Cleric. You can dip Paladin after level 1, you do not get heavy armor proficiency. There's no other class that is going to give you heavy armor proficiency and a spell casting level. Only Cleric can do that. So if you want heavy armor, Cleric is a good option if you want an armor dip. Yet you might also want Cleric for any of the other things that it gives you. And who would want that? Well, wizards, sorcerers, bards, or rogues who are going to focus on True Strike through Wisdom. All of these classes would benefit from a 1-level dip in Cleric just for armor alone, never mind the access to spells like Bless and all that. Whether you would want it as a first level dip is another matter. You might want to wait until level 2. Then we're going to talk about Druids. So what is the advantage of a 1-level Druid dip? Well, first off, the requirement, same as a Cleric. You need a Wisdom of 13. And here's what you get. You get light armor and shield training. You get 2 Druid cantrips. You get 4 Druid first level prepared spells. You get 1 level in spell slot progression. You get Druidic, and that gives you a Speak with Animals preparation for free as well. That's included now. And we're going to get Primal Order. This gives you either an extra cantrip and Wisdom to Arcana or Nature, or martial weapons and medium armor. And I should mention that when we're talking about accessing those first level Druid spells and cantrips, Good Berry and Jump, I would say, are both standout first level spells that you might want to be casting even at high level with your first level spell slots. And as far as cantrips go, Shillelagh is a bit of a standout cantrip now as well. There are builds that you're going to make where Shillelagh is going to be essential. And so that first level Druid dip is a good way to get it. If you dip at level 1, here's what you get. You're going to get Intelligence and Wisdom saving throw proficiency, which I think is fine. You're going to get proficiency with the Herbalism kit. You don't get that if you multiclass into Druid after level 1. You have to be level 1 in order to get the Herbalism kit, if that's important to you. Herbalism kit is used for the creation of healing potions. And then we're going to get 8+ Constitution hit points, which again is nothing to write home about. So I would say, unless you really want that Herbalism kit, I don't think this is a great first level dip. I think it's a better dip later on. So who might want to take this dip? Well, first off, Rangers. The Ranger can use a fighting style to access some Druid cantrips, but that's pretty expensive. They really want their fighting style for other things. With a dip in Druid, they can access those cantrips they need, and they can use their fighting style for whatever they want. And, I mean, the most obvious cantrip that a Ranger might want is Shillelagh. And I do think this is a good dip for Rangers, but I wouldn't do it until after level 5. Second, any character that is going to use a weapon and a shield, or 2-weapon fighting, might want Shillelagh. So if you're doing 2-weapon fighting, you can cast Shillelagh on a club, which is a light weapon, which qualifies for 2-weapon fighting. And if you're using a weapon and a shield, you can use a quarterstaff and get the topple mastery, and you can use Shillelagh and do a lot more damage with it. If you're wisdom focused, you might want Shillelagh for your attack and damage rolls to use wisdom. But for a lot of characters, I don't think that will be the priority. The priority will be the scaling damage that Shillelagh provides, as well as the reliable damage type. Wizards, sorcerers, and warlocks might also want to dip Druid just for the armor dip. So basically, in 2014, you would not do Druid for an armor dip, and you wouldn't do Druid for an armor dip because they had that restriction regarding metal armor, and you didn't want that. So you would do Cleric instead if you had the 13 wisdom. Now I think you have a pretty even choice, unless you are strength forward. If you're strength forward, then you probably want the heavy armor. But if you are not, if you got your 14 dexterity and medium armor is good enough, then whether you choose Cleric or Druid, I think is a pretty even trade. Like, you know, you're getting different things with each one, but they're both good things. And I think it's fairly even. Though I don't think Cleric or Druid is your only choice anymore, and I'll be going over that in a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about fighters. So, with a fighter, you need either a strength or dexterity of 13. This is basically not a qualifier at all. Pretty much any build you make is going to qualify for a fighter dip if you want. This is easily the most permissive. So that's one big advantage of a fighter dip is if you want a fighter dip, you probably don't need to worry about your ability scores. They probably already qualify. And here's what you're going to get. You're going to get a D10 hit point, which is probably an increase. You're going to get martial weapon proficiency, and then light and medium armor and shield training. You're going to get 3 weapon masteries. This is the most that any dip will give you. So if you are planning to use a number of different weapons, fighter is going to give you more masteries than any other first level dip. You're going to get 2 second win uses. They each give you a D10 plus 1, and they're not going to scale if you only dip. And you are going to get a fighting style. And this is a bit of a standout too, because fighter is the only class you can dip where you're going to get the fighting style with a 1 level dip. Any other class that has a fighting style, you'll need 2 levels. If you dip at level 1, you're going to get Constitution and Strength saving throw proficiency, like with the Barbarian. This is good, generally, I would say. You're going to get 10 plus Constitution starting hit points, and you're going to get heavy armor proficiency. You won't get that if you dip fighter after level 1. So who wants to dip a fighter? Any non-two-handed melee weapon user without a fighting style might want to consider a fighter dip. Whether you're using a one-handed weapon and you can use dueling, whether you are using a ranged weapon and you can use archery, whether you're using thrown weapons and you use the thrown weapon fighting style, these are all really good fighting styles. So they might be worth the dip on their own. Valor Bard might want a 1-level fighter dip, because if they're strength forward, they're going to want the heavy armor, in which case they want to take it at level 1. But they also want the weapon masteries that fighter is going to give them. They are also going to want the Constitution saving throw proficiency, which again means they probably want to take fighter at level 1, because they're going to be concentrating on spells. Blade Pact Warlock, same as the Valor Bard, might want a level 1 fighter dip for all the same reasons, and even more so for the armor. And True Strike Rogues will also want to consider a 1-level fighter dip, because they can get the archery fighting style, which they probably want, unless they're going into melee, in which case they might want 2-weapon fighting style. And they want the armor, especially if they're going True Strike. They're not concentrating on dexterity, so they want the armor, so their armor class doesn't suffer for that. So for any of those kinds of builds, a 1st-level fighter dip, often taken at level 1, can be a really good choice. All right, and a 1-level monk dip. So what do you need for that? You need both Wisdom and Dexterity 13. So this is the first class that we're looking at that requires 2 different ability scores at 13 to qualify. However, I will say this fits like a glove for Wisdom-based casters like Rangers, Druids, and Clerics, but it can be a difficult fit for any character focused on Strength or any caster that isn't Wisdom-focused. And what do you get? Well, you're going to get Unarmored Defense, and you're probably going to want to use it, because if you're going to be putting on armor, then you are not going to get access to martial arts, and that's probably the main reason you want to consider Monk in the first place. So you're probably going to want to use Unarmored Defense, which means you probably want to be a Wisdom-focused character. You're going to get Martial Arts with a D6, and Martial Arts is going to allow for the use of Dexterity without using the Finesse or without access to the Finesse property for any melee weapon that is simple or has a light property. The most notable thing here is Shillelagh. So we know that if you get Shillelagh through Druid, it'll use your Wisdom. If you get it through Warlock, it could use your Charisma. One ability it won't use is Dexterity, unless you have a Monk dip. Then you can call it a Monk weapon, and it does use your Dexterity, and it can be a nice combination. Martial Arts is also going to allow, and this is new in 2024, it allows grapple and shove attempts to use Dexterity. This is a huge benefit if you are a Dexterity-focused character, especially if you have an Unarmed Strike as a bonus action, because you're not just making a D6 attack, you might be grappling, you might be shoving. And just to note, if you want to use martial arts, the only weapons you can use are those that are monk weapons. You can choose to have no weapons, and that's fine. But if you have a weapon in hand that's not a monk weapon, you cannot use martial arts. And also, if you're wearing armor or wearing a shield, that's the bigger one. You need to be using unarmored defense if you want to use martial arts, and martial arts is probably the reason you wanted to dip monk in the first place. So if you are not planning to use unarmored defense, don't dip monk. Dipping monk at level 1, maybe you want unarmored defense right from level 1. That's one reason you might want to do it, but it's not going to give you a lot more than dipping it later. You can get 8 plus Constitution plus hit points. Good chance that's not higher than you already would have had. You're going to get Strength and Dexterity saving throws. I wouldn't consider that particularly valuable. And you're going to get proficiency in one musical instrument or one type of artisan's tool. So if you really, really want that one proficiency, then that might be a reason to dip monk, but that's really the only reason to dip monk at level 1. Otherwise, I'd just wait and do it later. This is a good dip. It's a good dip for clerics. It's a good dip for druids. It's a good dip for wisdom-based True Strike rogues. In fact, I'd almost consider it an automatic for wisdom-based True Strike rogues. It is a pretty good dip for even a dexterity-based rogue, and it is a good dip for rangers. So now Paladins. Now Paladins in the 2014 rules, I almost never considered as a dipping class. That has changed a fair amount. So the qualifications for Paladin dipping are not great. It's Charisma and Strength 13. And this is just not going to be ideal for most characters. It's really restrictive. There's a very good chance that if you're focusing on either of these ability scores, the other one would have been a dump stat otherwise. So it can be a tough dip to do. However, you get a lot. Here's what you're going to get. You're going to get martial weapon proficiency. You're going to get light, medium armor, and shield training. You're going to get 1 level in spell slot progression. You didn't used to get this. This is a big deal. In 2014, if you dip 1 level in Paladin, no spell slot progression. Now you get a full level. You're going to get 2 first level Paladin spells. You're going to get 5 points of lay on hands. And you're going to get 2 weapon masteries. I should also point out that if you are going to be selecting your Paladin spells and you are playing a martial character, there are a number of smite spells available as first level spells that are pretty good. And so if you are a weapon user, especially a weapon user that is going to have spell slots, like something like a Valibard or something, take a look at the first level smite spells available to Paladins. Ones like Searing Smite, Wrathful Smite, Thunderous Smite, or even Divine Smite are considerations for your Paladin spells. For non-casters, I'd look at Divine Favor as a first level spell because you only have to cast it once, meaning it's not going to drain spell slots as fast as the other ones, and you don't upcast it. So if you're a non-caster, Divine Favor is the way I'd go. If you are a caster, I'd be looking at the various smite spells available at level 1. This is one of the most improved first level dips, even though it is difficult to qualify for. Now, if you dip at level 1, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get 10 plus Constitution hit points. You're going to get heavy armor proficiency, which you won't get if you multiclass later on. And you're going to get Wisdom and Charisma saving throws, which is okay. This dip, I'd say, is very good for Valabards. But if you are going to do this with a Valibard, it pretty much forces you to make a strength forward Valibard, not a dexterity forward Valibard. It's also good for Blade Pact Warlock, but again, you have to be a strength-focused Blade Pact Warlock. And it is also a consideration as an armor dip for Charisma casters. But the strength requirement is tough. But you do maintain your spell slot progression. But Paladin isn't the most improved as a first level dip. I'd say the most improved is the Ranger. The Ranger as a first level dip is incredibly good now. So what do we need? We need Wisdom and Dexterity 13. This sounds hard because it is 2 ability scores. So these are the same requirements as the Monk, and just like with the Monk, I'd say these aren't all that difficult considering there's 2 different ability scores. Really, this shouldn't be any harder to qualify for than Cleric or Druid for any non-strength based character, because you probably already have the Dexterity of 13 that you need. So if you're a caster and you want to dip for armor, maybe you're a wizard, for example, Ranger is about as easy to qualify for as Cleric or Druid for an armor dip. And what does it give us? Well, it gives us martial weapon proficiency, gives us light and medium armor, and shield training. We also get 1 extra skill proficiency. We also get 2 Ranger prepared spells. We also get a full level of spell slot progression. Didn't used to get that. We get free Hunter's Mark preparation and 2 free castings of it. We get 2 weapon masteries. And I will mention that if you are selecting Ranger spells, you might want to look at Goodberry and Jump. Neither of these are going to be based on your wisdom. I mean, technically they're based on your wisdom, but your wisdom score doesn't really matter for the effects of them. And they're both standout spells at level 1. If you dip at level 1, you're going to get 10 plus Constitution hit points, Strength and Dexterity saving throw proficiency, which, I would say this isn't a great first level dip. Even if I'm doing a caster and I want the armor, I might wait to level 2 and dip it at that point. So who wants to dip 1 level of Ranger? As an armor dip for casters or wisdom-based rogues, I think it's really good. For wizards, sorcerers, warlocks, and bards, I think it is a good armor dip for all of them. And so Ranger in 2014, I would never worry about it as a first level dip. Might as well dip fighter, right? But now I think it's just so much better if you are a caster. And it's so much easier to qualify for most casters than Paladin is. I mean, think about it this way. Let's say you are a sorcerer and you want an armor dip. What's easier to qualify for, Paladin or Ranger? Well, you probably already have the Dexterity of 13, so that's no problem. And for a Paladin, you probably already have the Charisma of 13. I would hope so. So that's no problem. So we can basically ignore those requirements. And so it becomes, which one is easier to get a 13 in, Wisdom or Strength? I'd say probably Wisdom is more likely to be easy to get a 13 on, because Wisdom at least is an important saving throw. So we might want a decent Wisdom anyway. So yeah, at first glance, it seems like Paladin should be the obvious armor dip for Sorcerer. But when you start working the build, you realize that Ranger is just as easy and is offering you just as much and maybe more. So Rogues. Do we want to dip one level of Rogue? Well, this is what we'll get. We'll get one extra skill proficiency. We'll get Thieves' Tool proficiency, even if we get it at a later level. We will get Light Armor Training. We'll get Expertise in 2 skills. This is the only class that's going to give us Expertise in 2 skills. We're going to get Sneak Attack for a D6. We're going to get Thieves' Cant. And we're going to get Weapon Mastery with 2 weapons that we have proficiency with. And I had to read that again because in my head I had remembered it that Thieves only got Weapon Mastery with simple weapons or martial weapons that had the light or finesse property or were ranged, I think. But that's not, I mean, that's what rogues get proficiency with. But if you multi-class rogue from a class that already had martial weapon proficiency, you can use their weapon mastery to get mastery in any weapon you have proficiency with. If you dip at level 1, you're going to get 8 plus constitution hit points. No big deal. Dexterity and intelligence saving throws, I would say that's not great. You're going to get 1 more extra skill proficiency. So if we dip rogue at level 2 or higher, we're going to get 1 extra skill. If we dip rogue at level 1, we'll get 2 extra skills. And then we'll get simple weapons and martial weapons with finesse or light property. We do not get weapon proficiency from rogue if we dip it after level 1. For most classes, I'd say don't worry about dipping rogue. There is 2 cases where I'd say consider it. The first is if you are a very skill-focused character, maybe you're a bard, and you want to focus even more on skills, then a rogue dip might be a good idea. And the second is Rangers. Rangers after level 5 might want to consider it as well. Rangers are quite likely to be using either finesse weapons or ranged weapons anyways, so they're going to qualify for that sneak attack, and it's just a pretty easy dip for them to do. Alright, Sorcerer. 1 level dip in Sorcerer. What do you need? You need a Charisma 13. I mean, for a lot of characters, this is really easy. And then what do you get? You're going to get 1 level spell slot progression. You're going to get 4 Sorcerer cantrips. You're going to get 2 Sorcerer first level spell preparations. You're going to get innate sorcery twice per long rest. Now, the one thing I want to mention about innate sorcery. So innate sorcery gives you advantage on your attack rolls with spells and increases the DC of those spells by +1. It's a bonus action to activate, lasts a minute. And this sounds really, really good if you are a caster multiclassing into Sorcerer. But innate sorcery only works with your Sorcerer spells. Meaning it helps your 4 Sorcerer cantrips that you select and the 2 Sorcerer first level spell preparations. It could be useful if you're going to make a True Strike charisma based character, but in a lot of cases I think innate sorcery will go to waste if you're only taking Sorcerer as a 1 level dip. For standout spells at level 1, Shield is the obvious standout spell at level 1. But Jump, I would say, is also a standout spell, and neither of them are going to care whether you're focused on charisma or not. And I will also say that attack cantrips are available if you are a weapon user. True Strike through the player's handbook, and if you're using older materials, there's Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade as well. They are on the Sorcerer list. If you dip at level 1, you're going to get 6 plus Constitution hit points, which is bad. However, you're going to get Constitution and Charisma saving throw proficiency, and if you are a caster, that's really good, because Constitution is the saving throw you're going to make for concentration saves. So this dip is good for any caster who wants a 1 level dip to get the shield spell. And that Constitution save is also helpful for any caster. Clerics and Druids might want it for shield and for Constitution saving throw proficiency, and they should also dip at level 1. Warlocks for shield and 2 first level spell slots, and they should also dip at level 1. Paladins for the shield spell, And they should also consider dipping at level 1 unless they want to use heavy armor. If they want to use heavy armor, they can't. They have to go Paladin level 1. And characters that use True Strike with Charisma, rogues being the most obvious, 1-level Sorcerer dip can be good for them as well, can give you advantage. And then Bards in lower level campaigns for the Shield spell dip. If you are playing in a higher level campaign, Bards can get Shield without a dip in Sorcerer. So a lot of different classes might want to consider a 1-level dip in Sorcerer. All right, now we go on to do what in 2014 was the most common dip of them all, the 1-level Warlock dip. And specifically what we saw a lot of are dips in Warlock where they take the Hexblade subclass. Can't do that anymore. Now you have to be level 3, even if you're using older materials like Hexblade. Here's what you need to dip a level of Warlock. You need Charisma 13, not too bad. What do you get? You're going to get Light Armor Training, You're going to get Pack Magic with 1 first level slot, but it has a short rest recovery. We're going to get 2 Warlock cantrips, 2 Warlock first level spells, 1 Eldritch Invocation that it has to be available to a first level Warlock, which means a very small list. Here are the standout available invocations. Eldritch Mind might save you a feat, right? If you don't need the other aspects of Warcaster, you're just looking for advantage on your concentration saves, Eldritch Mind will give you that. Pact of the Blade. So this allows you to swap your damage types to different damage types for reliability. And if you have a charisma-focused character, it allows you to use charisma on weapon-based attacks. Finally, it is going to allow you to use your weapon as a spell-casting focus. It doesn't even say specifically for Warlock spells, but I would maybe check with your DM. But it just generally says as a spell-casting focus. Then we have Pact of the Chain, which takes the best first-level spell in the game and makes it significantly better. So that is really good. And then Pact of the Tome. And so the main thing Pact of the Tome will do for you is it'll take cantrips that normally aren't charisma-based and allows you to make them charisma-based, as well as 2 first-level rituals. If you dip Warlock at level 1, you're going to get 8+ Constitution hit points. You're going to get Wisdom and Charisma saving throws. Overall, not a great first-level dip. I'd say it's better to take as a dip later on. That's different, right? We used to see Hexblade dips at level 1 all the time. I don't think we're going to see that quite the same. But the dip is still good for a number of different builds. If you want a charisma-based Shillelagh spell, you can do it through Magic Initiate Druid, or you can do it through a Warlock dip and take Pact of the Tome. I think this is a good dip for Paladins, to get mainly Pact of the Blade, so they can use their weapon using charisma. I think it's good for Valabards, for the same reason. I think it can be good for Sorcerers. Pact of the Tome can work nice for Sorcerers to just give them access to a couple ritual spells and a few cantrips that would normally not be charisma-based. Might be a good dip just for Pact of the Chain. This could be on any character that qualifies. Pact of the Chain is that good that it might fit on all kinds of builds that you wouldn't normally think Warlock. And any weapon user that wants reliable damage with their attacks can use Pact of the Blade to get that reliable damage. And we finish up with the 1-level Wizard dip. What you need is Intelligence 13. This is, like with the Barbarian, this is deceptively difficult for a lot of builds. It's often difficult to fit an Intelligence 13 on all kinds of builds. So this isn't an easy dip necessarily, but here's what you get. You're going to get 1-level spell slot progression. You're going to get 3 Wizard first-level cantrips. You are going to get 6 first-level spells in your spellbook. You'll get Ritual Adept, and here's some rituals I would recommend. This is more than you're going to take, so select amongst these, but find Familiar, Comprehend Languages, Detect Magic, Identify, Tensor's Floating Disc, and Unseen Servant. I think are all very good rituals. You're going to get Arcane Recovery, which is going to be for 1 level of spell slots. And the standout spells, I'd say, Shield, obviously, and Jump. If you dip at level 1, here's what you get in addition. Nothing. So don't dip at level 1. I'd be dipping Wizard later on. So, does anyone want to dip Wizard? Yes. An intelligence-based rogue using True Strike, I think Wizard is a great dip for them. And I also think it is a good dip for Clerics or Druids, and probably better than Sorcerer. Because in addition to picking up the shield spell, which is probably why you were considering Sorcerer in the first place, We're also going to get Arcane Recovery, and we're also going to get Ritual Adept, and that's going to be really nice for your Cleric and Druid, and I think better than innate Sorcery. And that is all 12 classes, and why you might want to dip them, what kind of builds you might want to dip them on. And in my next video, I am going to use one of these dips that I wouldn't have used in 2014 for my wizard build. This is a wizard that I was playing in progressive one-shots, and now I've started to play it in an ongoing campaign. So I'm going to share that with you in my next video. And it's not really an exploit build. It's more just this is what I would do with a wizard these days build. So I'm going to share it with you in my next video. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.